Welcome to this session of InfoTouch University Online. Today's topic is the inventory record and all of the fields associated with it. This is a big topic, and it's a very important one as well, as these fields really are at the heart of what we can do in various other modules, including the register module and the replenishment module. How these things actually take place and are utilized is often controlled by setup option modules. So we're going to be looking at a number of different modules today as we go over the different fields in the inventory record. So let's start out with modify inventory, and let's find an existing record. So we can find that record by its department, or by item number, or by UPC code. There's even an option to find it by other methods, alternate keys, vendor item number, or just a wildcard search. Note if you use these that, in fact, what we will be doing is going through every single inventory record looking for matching records, which is why this message here says this could be slow. And by and large, most people use one of the three primary keys out here in front. If you do find by department, you're going to find that we're going to get a breakdown of additional fields based on the indices for that department. And again, indices are the way each inventory department is broken down. So for example, miscellaneous here is a very simple one. We just have a bunch of items. On the other hand, if we look at, say, beer, we have type, domestic, import, microbrew, various brands and sizes. So you would need to select one from each of the columns in order to find an item. And you get a whole list here of these things. There could be quite a large number in there. In this case, I've selected a specific Ballantine beer. Once you select the item, and it does not matter whether you select it by description or by other methods. By the way, if you common question comes up, I'm in this record, how do I find another one? This find button at the top lets you come back and start from scratch. We can go ahead and type in a specific item number or UPC here. So here is Christian Brothers Brandy. Note when you're creating items that you will also have to fill in all of these fields. The item description, which is the combination of the department and all of the different indices, must be unique. The software will not allow you to create items with duplicate descriptions, and this is what allows us to find an item directly in the register module when you ring it up by description. The item number also must be unique, and it must be there. If you use what's called automatic item numbers, then the system will suggest the next available item number. Otherwise, it won't, and you have to put something in manually. The UPC field, if entered, must be unique as well. However, it is an optional field. It can be blank. But if you put something in there, it has to be unique throughout all of your inventory. Okay, so let's take a look at the fields in the record. That's the subject of today's webinar, and you'll notice that we have a tab dialog with 2, 4, 6, 7 different tabs. So there is quite a lot of information here associated with each item. We'll start with cost. Nobody's bothered to put in a cost for this brandy here, so I'll go ahead and do that now. And let me stop you right now, and let's take our first segue over to the setup module. You'll notice that there are 2 decimal digits after the period in the cost and the price. You should know that that is a setup option by department. So if I actually wanted to have 3 or 4 decimal digits, and unlikely in a liquor store, but think of, say, a copy store where you're doing volume copying, and if you do over 5,000 copies, they will often give you pricing at greater than 2 decimal digits. That is, say, less than a penny. So, it's 5.234 cents or 5.2345 cents per copy after 5,000 or something of that sort. So that is an option by department. As you'll see, there's a lot of options by department, and some of these will play into how some of the fields in the inventory record are actually utilized. But for the most part, people stick with 2 digits. So let's say this Christian Brothers brandy cost me $10. This is my current cost, okay? So this is something I can modify directly, and the system will modify directly also when you receive inventory, either using the adjust inventory function or receive a purchase order. So as something is received into stock, whatever its cost is, whether it's the same or different than the current cost, it is going to update the current cost. So it's the most recent cost that you have received into stock. Normally, the profit type here is set to calculated, which gives you a profit margin based on your cost and your retail price. It is an option, however, to set fixed percentage or fixed dollar options for your gross profit, in which case, if you select one of these, instead of entering in the retail price, I get to enter in the profit margin. So at 40 points, $10 is $16.66. Let's say my cost changes to $9. You'll see that, not $99, sorry, but $9. You'll see that the retail price automatically switched to $15 to maintain the 40-point margin. You can do this on a dollar basis as well. It is unusual, but it's something you should know is there. Most people certainly use the calculated side of things, and we'll go back and put this at, say, $17.99. Okay, we also have a sale end date. You'll notice it's not checked, which means that this item is not on sale. If I check it, I can manually go ahead and set both an end date for the sale and a sale price. So as long as today's date is not after this end date, we will use the sale price in the record. So if I do this, then through Saturday, I'll only be charging $15.99 for that Christian Brothers brandy. Most people actually don't do this item by item. There is a function in transform inventory, which is outside of today's topic of conversation, that will let you set a range of items on sale, potentially in advance, also potentially with start and stop dates. So I could say for all of my brandies, I want to set them to be 20% off the current list price starting October 23rd and revert to the normal price on November 1st. And that can be done for hundreds of items with a single, well, 2 or 3 clicks or so. So that's the typical way to do it, but you can do it on an item-by-item record level. Okay, the average cost, and you'll notice it's 0. The current cost was 0. We didn't do much with this item here in terms of costing. So the current average cost is 0. That's not what you're hopefully going to see normally. As you receive inventory into stock, again, whether using adjust inventory or purchase orders, what we will do is take the value of the current inventory. In this case, it would be 15 on hand times 9 is 145. Then we take the value of whatever you were receiving. Let's say we receive another five items at $10 each, 50 bucks. Now we got $195 in total inventory and 15 plus 5 on hand. We'll divide that 20 into the 15, into the $195 and come up with a weighted average cost. You'll notice this field is in gray. You cannot change it directly. So the system automatically maintains that as you receive inventory into stock. This is the number, the average cost, not the current cost, that is recorded when you make sales, because it is a more accurate indication of the profitability of the item being sold. One final note on the average cost: if the quantity on hand is 0 or less, and we do allow you to go into negative quantities, then anytime you receive, the current cost will become the average cost because there's nothing to average with. You didn't have any value because you didn't have any quantity on hand. So that's actually a little bit of a trick there if you actually wanted to go ahead and manually adjust the average cost, you could use something like a quantity adjustment function in the adjust inventory menu to get the quantity back down to 0, then receive that item back into stock at the current quantity and the correct price cost, and the average cost would be set to that. So a little bit of a trick there. But normally you just let the system maintain that, and again, that is what is recorded with the sales. So when you run a department profit report or an inventory movement report sorted by profit, we're going off of the average cost at the time the item was sold. Sales premium, also known as a SPIF, is a way to incent your employees to sell items. So if the sales premium is non-zero, anytime an employee sells one, they get credit in the bonus column of the employee compensation section for that sales premium or SPIF. Location within the store, it's not a lot of characters. I believe it's up to 8. This displays an inventory lookup in the register. So if you want to direct somebody back to where they're supposed to go without leaving the register, the clerk can use inventory lookup, see where it is, and say, go to aisle 5. Short description is used for printing less than the full description on receipts. This would be done using the invoice formatter. By default, we are going to print, when we sell one of these, liquor, brandy, Christian Brothers, 1.75 liters, which is a full 40 characters, by the way, and takes up a line on its own. Some people don't want to bother with all of that stuff. So what we can do here, for example, and you don't have a lot of space here, by the way. Let's make this Christian 1.75 liters. The short description here can be used in place of the full description on the receipt. It certainly makes it a lot easier to get one line item on the receipt per item sold. And it is also an option for when you print price labels to use the short description rather than the full description. The next field is the weight of the item, and this weight actually has 2 separate purposes. And let's start with the default, and this is controlled by a setup module option. In miscellaneous setup number 2, there is an option for spreading the freight cost on a purchase order. So the default is not to bother with it. When you receive the purchase order, the freight does not affect the cost of the items that you ordered. Let's say I order 2 items, 1 brick and 1 package of balloons. Now, of course, the brick weighs a lot more than the balloons. If you don't bother to put in weights, you can select spread PO freight cost by quantity. And in which case, if I ordered 1 of each, the software would say, well, 50% of the freight cost should go to the balloons and 50% of the freight cost should go to the brick. If you want to be a little more accurate, though, presumably a lot more of that freight cost really comes from the brick. And if you spread your PO freight cost by weight and you have weights in your inventory record, then we will go ahead and actually do the math and figure out that, guess what, that brick was actually 95% of the shipping costs and the balloons were the remaining 5%, and adjust it that way. There is a second entirely different purpose for weights, and it's one that's coming up a lot lately, and that is for tears when using a scale. So there is a registry setting that you can put into the system that says, you know what, I don't really want to use this weight field for POs. I'm in a market where I use scales, I'm weighing up cheese, I'm weighing up chocolates, what have you, and I weigh them in a standard size wrapper or box, and I want that weight for that wrapper or box to be subtracted from the weight that the scale reads. In other words, I want to set a tier for this item. So that's the other purpose of weight, and the whole scale thing is really exploding on us at this point. There's been a lot of orders from chocolate stores, from produce markets, from meat markets, from ethnic grocery stores, and you name it, that use scales and are seeing this as a very valuable function. All right, on the right-hand side we're still on the first tab of this record here, we have a bunch of quantities, and you'll notice the first four are grayed out and are not modifiable. I'm typing right now and nothing's happening. So the system wants to maintain the quantity on hand. Every time you sell one, we lose one. Every time you receive stuff, we add in. If you do a physical, we'll adjust it. But the point here is that we have an audit trail of exactly what changed the quantity on hand. So you can actually run reports and figure out precisely what determined how we got to this current quantity. We sold 10, we received 20, we adjusted one out as broken using the quantity adjustment. There's an audit trail for all of those. As you place purchase orders, the quantity on order goes up. As you receive them, they go down. Quantity allocated comes from wholesales. So if I suspend a sale, or let's say I put something on layaway, I haven't actually sold it. We don't really want to reduce it from the quantity on hand. However, we have a pretty good suspicion that that customer is going to come by and finish off paying it, and therefore, from the point of view of replenishment of automatic purchase order generation, we do actually count that quantity allocated, even though it's still in stock, as essentially not being there. So we think it's going to be taken away. We need to account for that when we place our next purchase order. And this is principally for Enterprise Manager customers. You can go ahead and set up transfers from Enterprise Manager, and the quantity in transit will be adjusted as you do those transfers. Okay, all of this feeds into the min, max, and reorder quantities. Let's start with min, max. And this is used for automatic purchase order generation. There's also a report, by the way, called the order status report that will also use these numbers to figure out what you need to order without actually placing a PO. So the logic here is such. I take the quantity on hand. I add the quantity on order, because if I know something's coming in, I don't want to order it again. I subtract the quantity allocated and in transit, and if that number is below the minimum, then when I run my auto PO generation, order status type functions, then we're going to suggest or place purchase orders directly to get you up to the maximum. So in this case, it would not actually place a purchase order for this item because the quantity on hand is greater than the minimum. However, at this point, the quantity on hand is less than the minimum, and we would try to order, normally we try to order 85. In other words, we try to get from this 15 up to 100. A rather little used feature anymore is the reorder quantity. This says that I am going to, my vendor basically incents me to order in blocks of whatever number you put in here, in this case 6. It's economically favorable for me to do quantities that are a multiple of 6 rather than the default, which would be 0 or 1. Actually, neither of those makes any difference. So in this case, we'd order 85. If it was set to 6, we would actually order 84, which is the quantity of multiple of 6 that is just below the quantity that would get us to the maximum. So we're not going to get you over the maximum. We're going to get you as close to the maximum as we can in reorder quantity multiples. Again, this is really, quite honestly, rarely used, but it is there. Okay, we finished our first tab. Second one is taxes, and this is a fairly empty screen right now because we only have one tax category set up. By the way, you can't modify tax categories in the middle of a day, but you can look at it. So we have a tax category that's just a straight 7% sales tax. If you check that tax category will be applied to the item when it is sold. We do support up to 15 tax categories per location. So, for example, I might, here in the Atlanta area, have separate tax categories for Georgia State, Fulton County, which is the county Atlanta is in, City of Atlanta. Maybe we have something here called a special local option sales tax, or SPLOST, that's used for purposes like education or improving mass transit or what have you. They're usually temporary. In any case, any of those items, if you had those categories, you would simply check the associated tax category on this screen to make sure the item is associated with it. It's not a requirement that an item be associated with any tax categories, and you can use any combination you feel like. The most common is just to have a sales tax like this, and by the way, if this item was not taxable, all I do is uncheck it, and this item is no longer taxable. You'll also notice something up here for VAT category, and this is really not used much in the United States. It is used in Canada all the time. It's used in Europe all the time. A VAT tax from our point of sale perspective is a tax where the tax itself is buried in the price of the item. So when you ring up the item, it doesn't show with this price here, $17.99, it actually will ring up at $17.99 plus whatever the tax would be as the line item, and then there's typically no separate breakdown of taxing on the receipt. I'm not going to go any further with that because it's essentially never used in the U.S. There's been some talk about implementing that as part of the current changes in the economic picture of things, but that's not likely to happen anytime real soon. So let's just ignore VAT category for now. All right, our special features tab is a big one. And it's got a lot of different check boxes that do different things. And let's start on the first one, which is explosion item. An explosion item itself is something that actually has 4 different options as to how it works. And this comes from setup again. So let's go to setup. Let's take a look at our liquor department, which is the department we're currently looking at. And you'll notice parts explosion type, there are literally 4 options here, and you can change them by department. So one of them, the one that this one is currently set for, is deposit/tax. This is used for automatic bottle deposits, as well as, I think Jeanette looks like she's on the line here in Cook County. In the Chicago area, they have like hundreds of tax categories based on different types of liquor. There's no rhyme or reason to it, and in any case, our maximum is 15. So for folks selling liquor stores in Cook County, you actually can set up a separate tax department, which isn't a true tax, but it will at least track these hundreds of tax categories for you and give you reports that you can send to the county. But the most common use by far is deposit. So let's take a look, first of all, what we have here. There's a show detail button that appears next to the explosion item if it's checked. And what this is showing you is that this item actually has got Cook County tax associated with it. We have the tax side of things here. So let's take a look at the register now. And I'm going to ring up item number 173, which is in a liquor department, which we have age verification turned on. So it is prompting me for my birth date. That's not my birth date, by the way. But you'll notice that when we rang up the brandy, we automatically got the Cook County tax. And by the way, normally when you touch a line item, you get bunches of functions. With the deposit/tax type, it's sacrosanct. You can't touch it, you can't change it, you can't do anything to it. Okay, let's show you another way that this works. And here I've got the typical bottle deposit one. And I'm going to get ahead of myself and refer a bit to multiple units of measure. So I'm going to ring up an item. It's a Samuel Adams 30-pack, and it comes in different units of measure, as we can see here. We'll get to the actual setting up of the units of measure in a minute or two, but we sell this thing by the case, the six-pack and singles. You'll see the six-pack is highlighted, indicating it's the default. And I'll just go ahead and accept that. And this item also is set up in a department where the parts explosion type is deposit/tax, and we've linked the bottle deposit to it. Let's go to that item here. I'll go ahead and not save my changes to that record. And we're going to find item 877286, which is the Samuel Adams 30-pack. Now you'll notice this thing is set up for case six-pack and single, and it's set up for a bottle deposit. Now notice the quantity on the bottle deposit. It's quantity 6. On the tax that we saw recently, it was quantity 1. For items like beer that's sold in multiple units, what you want to do when you set up your deposit, and this could be for Coca-Colas as well, by the way, it doesn't have, not strictly related to alcohol. Whatever you set up as your default selling unit, in this case it's a six-pack, put in the quantity of items that you're selling as the quantity in your parts explosion formula. So when I sell a six-pack, I sell quantity 6. Why? Notice that we automatically came up with 6 bottle deposits when we rang up the six-pack. And if I edit the unit of measure and make it a case, it automatically switches to 30. If I make it a single, it'll switch to 1. So very user-friendly way of getting the bottle deposits in there associated with items with multiple units of measure, very commonly beer, for example, in a liquor store. Okay, so this has all been about the deposit tax option. I'm going to show you another one. And we're going to go to our miscellaneous department. And you'll notice the parts explosion type it is for at sale. And this is probably the most common option, actually. A parts explosion at sale is a way of putting together a sales kit or a bundle, and one that shows up in the register when you sell it. So, for example, let's go to my inventory record. I set up in advance here a miscellaneous special. I don't know the number on this, so I'm going to look it up by description. And you'll notice there's 3 lines here now. I've got a special on candy. I'm going to sell a Reese's Cup, a Butterfingers, and a Snickers for one low price of $10. Well, that's not very low, but that's the special. So let's go ahead and ring that item up. Here's the special. And you'll notice that we have a price associated with the kit or the bundle or whatever you want to call it. And then we actually detail out the components of the kit so that the customer can see right on the receipt that they got Reese's Cups, Butterfingers, and Snickers for this one low price. I can edit things like the quantity of this or the discount associated with the entire bundle or kit. I can also edit the components. I can get rid of lines or change quantities, but normally you're just going to sell the straight bundle, and this is a way of putting together some kind of special or kit that your customers can see right on the receipt they get that they got all these things for one price, and no pricing associated with the components of the kit. So that's option number 2. Let's go ahead and find option number 3. And I have a special item set up here for that as well. And this is a box of candy. Okay, now if you look at the components here, they're literally the same as what we had in our miscellaneous special. But if I go to my setup department and I look under candy, The parts explosion type is set to receive. And this is the third of the fourth type of parts explosion options. And what this says is I'm assembling this stuff in advance. I'm going to put out a box on the shelf of these items. And at the time I receive this candy, this box of candy into stock, I'm going to subtract the components from inventory at that time. So I'll subtract the Reese's and the Butterfingers when I add one of these boxes that I make up to the shelf. When I ring up one of these items, I don't get to see the components. I just am selling a medium box of candy. It's also $10 in this case. And when I receive this item into stock, I reduce the quantity on hand of each of these components. So if I'm in an assembly business where I'm putting stuff that's pre-configured onto the shelf, I could use the receive option to make sure that my component quantities on hand are accurate. In essence, the options here for the most part are indicating when the components are decremented from inventory. So receive, at sale, at the time it's sold, it'll be rung up at that point in time and then deducted from stock. Deposit/tax is a special case. And the other option is closeout, and at least for now I'm going to avoid that one. That's rarely used, in fact, mostly like in a food type environment where we're not really sure how many we're going to sell of our, let's say I have a burger that's made up of a patty, buns, lettuce, tomato, and special sauce. At closeout, those components are going to be subtracted at the daily closeout. So we don't really know in advance how many we're going to sell, nor do we want to receive the items into stock in advance because we don't know, again, how many we're going to sell during the day. So closeout will allow you to go ahead and adjust the quantities for the components automatically based on your sales at the daily closeout. Okay, I think I beat the parts explosion to death here. Let's go on. I'm not going to talk about group replenishment. It's almost never used. Non-discountable. Very straightforward. You check it, the item's not discountable. That means you cannot apply line item discounts to it, and if you have a sale discount, it will ignore this item. Substitution allows you to put in items that are substitutable for the one that you have here. If you're out of stock, there's a button in the register that allows you to go ahead and look up the substitutes and select one of them. Okay, alternate keys. I'm going to skip over for a second. Let's go back to multiple units of measure because that's kind of an important thing here as regards the alternate keys function, although it doesn't have to be, but it frequently is. So I'm not going to save these changes here, and I'm going to go find another item. Okay, and this item is some bud in a case, and it has multiple units. So let's talk about multiple units first. With multiple units, you can have up to 6 additional units that you sell this item in besides the unit that it is stocked in. So in this case, this bud is stocked in things called cases, and the quantity on hand that you saw in the first tab, the quantity on order, the minimum quantities, all those relate to the stocking unit. In addition, all the pricing in the inventory record, we've seen the retail price and we'll shortly see the price levels, come directly from the inventory record and are applied to the stocked unit. But I sell this beer in 6-packs, I sell it in singles, I sell it in 12 packs, and for items with multiple units, what you do is you tell us, well, there's 4 6-packs in a case. Also tell us how much you sell it for at retail and all of your price levels. Here's 24 singles. Again, tell us the pricing. 12-pack, 2 in a case, tell us the pricing. And then in the register module, typically what happens when you ring up this item, is you get prompted. Okay, tell me how you're selling this by. Case, single, 6-pack, 12-pack. Okay, how does this relate to alternate keys? Let's talk about what alternate keys are in the first place. Some people, and think of a bookstore, I've got my own item number for a book. I've got a UPC code on it. I've got an ISBN number. I want to be able to scan any of those three things and have it ring up in the register. Well, we have an item number and a UPC. What do I do with the ISBN? I put it in as an alternate key. And we can have up to 160 alternate keys per item. By the way, in the liquor store business, a lot of times people will come out with a different shape. Or I shouldn't say people. Manufacturers will come out with a different shape of the bottle. It's the same item. It just looks slightly different. They'll give it another UPC. As far as the store is concerned, it's exactly the same thing. So just put in that new UPC as an alternate key. Alternate keys support up to 24 characters, alphanumeric. And normally, they're just going to go ahead and do exactly, bring up the item exactly as if we had scanned the regular UPC. So let's see if I can make this work here. I'm going to copy this. I'll go to the register and paste it in. And there we saw it just like we rang it up originally by item number. Here we've rung it up by alternate key, and again, it prompts us for the unit of measure. Okay, you'll notice, and you'll only see this for items with multiple units, that there's a drop-down box here. What unit of measure is this linked to? By default, the answer is none. So we'll act exactly as if you'd scanned a UPC or item number. But you can tie an alternate key directly to a specific unit of measure. And in fact, I've done that with this other item here, 018-16820 should ring up a single without going through the unit of measure menu. And so it does. So you see it's exactly the same item, but with the alternate key feature set to ring up the single, it bypassed the menu of units of measure and just rang it up directly. So that's a handy thing to know about. And that gets us through alternate keys as well. So most people who don't use units of measure, alternate keys simply another thing you could scan at the register to ring up an item. Notes. Up to 340 character lines. These lines can be printed on price labels. They can be printed on the receipt. The example that we usually give for where this is used is in garden centers. So maybe you want to put in some instructions when you buy some roses on how to take care of them, you know, how much soil to put in, how often to water them, what kind of sunlight they want. And you can have that right on the receipt. So when the customer gets home and forgets what the person at the garden center told them to do with it, they can just look right on the receipt and get the instructions. Serialized inventory is also supported. We can have any number of serial records per item. And if an item is serialized, you do have to have an unsold serial number in order to sell that item. It is not hugely used. Some markets are very big into it, you know, appliances and things of that sort, for example. And most of our markets don't care about it. So I'm not going to spend any real time today on it, but just so you know, you can go ahead and have serialized inventory with the system. When you receive serialized inventory into stock, depending on your serial number option, will either automatically generate the next, let's say you receive 10, the next 10 available serial numbers, or will prompt you to enter the next 10 available serial numbers. The next 10 serial numbers you want to use if you don't have what's called automatic serial numbers. When it's sold, the date sold is filled. We also support rentals. Although it's not exactly a thriving business, think of a video rental store where they want to track specific DVD to a customer, and you can set up serialized rentals, track to a customer. Date due would be filled in automatically when you rented it. And by the way, if they return it late, well, we can automatically generate late fees. but that's not a real common topic right now, so I'm not going to worry about it. Suggestive selling, you know, the classic case, would you like fries with that? When you ring up this item, you're going to get this prompt on the register. There's an OK button. You just hit OK, and it's just a reminder to the customer, to the clerk, I should say, to talk to the customer. Normally, the price override checkbox is not checked. That is the default. And if that is the case, you cannot edit the price in the register. So in this case, no pun intended, it will let me edit the price. I rang this up while this thing was unchecked, and it remembers that. So normally this thing is grayed out, and you have to put in a discount if you want to change it, so we properly track it as a discount. But if you want to, you can check the price override, in which case we no longer will be so fussy about it and let you just change the price directly. Prompt for weight, very useful in those markets that are using those scales. So what this means is basically if we ring up this item, the software is going to immediately say, tell me how many you want of that. So normally we assume quantity 1. This, as soon as you ring it up, it's going to bring up the quantity keypad and ask you how many. Now, if you have the scale option turned on, and that's been a very popular one as of late, then we will not just ask you for the quantity, we'll automatically read the scale and stick it in there for you. So if you've got a scanner scale and somebody brings up, 1.5 pounds of cheese at the register, and there's a barcode that indicates the cheese, you put it on the scanner scale, it sees the barcode, it rings up the item, it immediately reads the weight, you're good to go. Food stamps. Is this item allowable with food stamps? We do support EBT through Mercury, through Sterling, also through Paymentech if you use the DataCap software, not PC Charge today. But we do support food stamps, and again, in some of these market environments, that's a big deal. You can only apply the food stamp tender to items with this checked. Unit conversion, I am not going to go over right now. It has mostly been superseded by the multiple units feature. Essentially, it was related to the idea that you had one alternate unit of measure that you did not sell in. We won't talk about it. It's there for legacy purposes, but it's not used much. Item status, 3 choices. Available, normal. You can sell it, you can purchase it, no problem. It shows up on reports, on inventory lookup. Concealed, okay. Concealed is mostly been used in, let's say, a franchise. The franchise has a list of inventory that they supply to their franchisees, but not necessarily all stores carry all items. What you do in that case is you take that list of inventory, you import it, and you set the status on all the items to concealed. An item with a status of concealed does not show up on reports in the inventory module. It does not show up in the inventory lookup function in the register module. As soon as you receive or do a physical inventory on one of these items, the software automatically sets it back to available. So for those items, the franchisee starts up, they do their initial count of inventory, everything that they actually are selling will now show up on reports and in the register module, but all those items that they don't carry will not. So that's kind of a nice feature for that sort of market. Finally, we do have a delete inventory function. I suggest you don't use it. Instead, set the status of the item to do not sell. This prevents you from selling the item. It prevents you from ordering more of it. And what it also does for you, as opposed to deleting the item, is it maintains your sales history. So if I delete this item and I run an electronic journal that includes the sale of this item, the description of it is going to be deleted item number 19272 because we have no clue what it is anymore because it's not there. If you set it to do not sell, then we'll be able to put the full description. There's actually an empty space here, and you can't see it because we don't have the appointment book. But if the appointment book option was there, you would get an option as to whether this item is to be scheduled and how much time to associate with it. So in my salons, I schedule my haircuts and my permanents. I don't schedule my shampoos and my conditioners. And my haircuts take 30 minutes, my permanents take an hour. You can override that, but that's the default the system is going to use for scheduling those items. Discount/price levels. Okay, let's start at the bottom. This is the easy stuff. We have up to 9 additional prices associated with items besides the retail price. Again, setup option. How many price levels do you want? Here we have retail, frequent buyer, and AARP. And all additional price levels besides retail, which is always there and can't be modified, by the way, will show up here. And this will let you put in the pricing for those. Very typically, this is invoked by linking the sale to a customer rather than manually selecting the price level, although you can do that too. Okay, then we have something up here called quantity price breaks, and there's really 3 flavors of it, one being none. But the more interesting ones would be things like this. So threshold pricing can be either a discount or a dollar, and it lets you do things like buy 2, get 1 free. That would be done this way. After I buy 2 up to 3, I'm going to get 100% discount. And in this case, by the way, you won't see this most of the time, but if an item has multiple units, you'll select whether this discount applies to all units or a specific unit of measure. So maybe I'm only doing this on 6-packs. There's lots of other ways to do this. Let's say I want to let them buy 3 and get an additional 2 at 50%. Okay, so my threshold's 3. When I allow them to go up to 5, which is 2 more, and I'll give them a 50% discount. I can also do dollar discounts and specify the dollar amount. One other thing, and this is especially important in liquor stores, is what we call retroactive discounts. So if I, in most liquor stores, buy a case of wine, meaning 12 bottles, then I get, say, a 10% discount. Now, this is not on the amount above 12, like the other stuff we saw was. Instead, what we're talking about is we're going to retroactively go back to every one of those line items that is rung up once we reach 12 and give them that 10% discount. A couple other factors to bear in mind. If I'm in that wine store, I might actually want to do that for not just a single item, which is what we have now, but for all of my wines. And what I do here is I essentially will set up a master wine item and put that item number in here, and then all we have to do for all the additional wines is put in that master wine item number in the group discount item, and any item, whether it's the group discount item number or any of the ones tied to it, will count towards that threshold quantity. So that's how I can do any 12 bottles of wine get a 10% discount. Also, you'll find in liquor stores that many of them will say, the normal size of 750 milliliters counts as 1, but we also have the big bottles of wine at 1.5 liters, and we'll let you count those as 2 because it's 2 bottles, right? How do you do that? Threshold multiplier. So at this point, if I sell one of these, it's counting as 2 towards the 12. Okay, the only difference between threshold retail and threshold all is whether this discounting applies to only the retail price level or to all price levels. So do you want your frequent buyers to get this? Maybe you don't because they're already getting a better price on things. Up to you. Quantity unit pricing is the last option. And by the way, you are looking right now at what will be out very shortly. InfoTouch Storekeeper POS 2.60 Release 2. If you look at what you have right now, it's Release 1. One of the features we've added that will be out with Release 2 is a change to the way quantity unit pricing is done. Okay, so let's talk about what it is first. Quantity unit pricing allows you to essentially define a quantity table and an associated price. So this is normally $17.99, but if you buy 25 of them, I'm only going to charge you, say 25 to 50. I'm going to charge only $16.99. Now this is not a discount, by the way. The threshold discount will show up as a discount. This is saying this is just the normal price based on this quantity, and you can go up to 12 different breakdowns and change the price that is associated with the quantity. When you're done, let's say you don't have anything above 50, hit end range, and let's say it's $14.99 for that. And you get to do this for each price level as well. So not only the retail pricing, but frequent buyer and AARP in this case. The change that if any of you are used to this function that you would see here is that up until release 2, we did not support fractional quantities with our table. So on the version you have, when you put it up to 25, this is going to say 26, not 25.001. But based on the fact that these markets are selling a lot, they want to be able to, I'm selling 1.5 pounds of chocolate, 2.5 pounds, I want to give them a special price on. We had no way to do that up until release 2, and we do now. And actually release 2 will upgrade your existing quantity unit pricing records to support fractional quantities. Okay, vendors. We can have up to 10 different vendors per item. Just click in either the vendor name or number section to select a vendor. Each vendor can have their own separate cost. It will default to using the current cost, but you can change that. The quantity on order is maintained by doing purchase orders and receiving them and is not adjustable. Each vendor can have their own separate vendor item number, which can be alphanumeric and 20-some characters long. This vendor item number is what appears on purchase orders. When you make a PO, the vendor item number, again, the default is the item's item number, but if you have a separate vendor item number, the vendor is going to look at it and say, aha, that's my number. A newish field that we've added in here is, or a couple fields, is essentially what you might call an ordering unit of measure. So this has nothing to do with selling now, this is purchasing. And take an example of a dollar store. Okay, I'm going to buy mugs and I'm going to sell mugs. I only sell one mug at a time. I don't get into multiple units, but when I buy those mugs from my vendor, boy, I don't buy one at a time. They always send me a box. And a box, let's say, of 24. So I can do something like that. And when I order from this vendor, it's going to say I'm ordering 3 boxes. When I receive that into stock, I'm going to receive 3 times 24 is 72 to my quantity on hand. The default, select another vendor here, is what you see here. There is no ordering name. The quantity is 1. So basically you're ordering in the units that you stock in. There is options for discounting. $$ means on a specific purchase order, if I order over $100, I'm going to get a discount of $2. Or if I order over $100, I'm going to get a discount of 2%. Or if I order quantity 100 or more, I get $2 off or 2% off. So these will happen automatically if you set these fields as you put items into a purchase order. If you get above the threshold, if it's not set to none, you'll get the appropriate discount automatically. And again, you can have up to 10 different vendors per item. Okay, the performance tab, mostly read-only. We are maintaining for you week-to-date, month-to-date, and year-to-date sales, cost of goods sold, quantity sold, and markdowns taken, that's a function in the adjust inventory menu, by the way. The purpose of doing things like weekly, monthly, and yearly closeouts is simply to zero out these kinds of fields. They're in other records like employees and some of our sales data that gets reported in the Transaction Manager module. And when you do a weekly closeout, it goes, okay, my week-to-date sales are now 0. Cost of goods sold is 0, quantity sold is 0, markdown 0. And then as you make additional sales and markdowns, we'll accumulate new week-to-date totals. But these are not modifiable. You just get to see them. If you have the loyalty points program turned on, you'll get this little box here with the loyalty program. Otherwise, you won't see it. And you can say per item, and these are completely separate. How many points do I earn when I buy one of these? And whether this product can be bought with points. So I can say, for example, if I save this off, I earn 10 points when I buy some of these beers. But I can't buy these beers with points. Or I can say, yeah, if I've got 100 points available, I can buy one of these for free. I can also do this. You don't get any points with it, but if you've got points from other items, you can buy the beer when you get to 100 points. And that, again, is associated with the loyalty points program, not the dollar program. Here in Miscellaneous 7, loyalty points. This is set to no, you won't see this little frame here. And finally, the picture is something that you can set. Now, what is actually going on here when you set a picture is it will browse to wherever you've told it to last using a standard Windows dialog. So let's say I go into my folder that I'm running right, well, actually, I can go into another folder. It really doesn't matter where I pick this out from. So I'll go into my gift store folder, and you'll notice it's looking for files of a type of JPEG. By the way, this used to be the only format supported. There is a way now to support things like BMPs and other file formats if you need to. It's kind of an odd situation, but it is there if you want it. So let's say I wanted to say that the picture associated with this item is the picture of a sweatshirt. No good reason. There's that sweatshirt, and now when we look up this item, if we save this off, in the inventory lookup function or the show information screen in the register, we would see a picture of this item. Now, in fact, you should know that what's happened here is not maybe what it seems. There's nothing in the record for the picture. Instead, what we're doing is we're looking for a file called, in the case of item number, itemnumber.jpg. For customer numbers, by the way, it's ccustomer_number.jpg. For employees, employee_number.jpg. If that file exists, then we'll show it here, we'll show it in the register. It's not actually stored in the record. It's simply copied to the folder, given the appropriate file name, and that way we know it's there. And by the way, if we don't want it anymore, Clear Picture simply deletes that file. And again, that's not the original file, it's the file we copied over to itemnumber.jpg. So that completes our overview of the employee of the inventory record. I'm going to stop this recording now.